Hi, everybody. I'm Evelyn Gansglass. I'm this is pretty funny, co-interim director of the Peace Corps Community for Refugees with Ann Baker, who just welcomed you earlier as well. And in this session, we're going to showcase what a number of the Peace Corps groups, as well as just individual Peace Corps volunteers have been doing to welcome refugees to their communities. The purpose of this session is not to be comprehensive at all because there are lots of other things going on, but we want to inspire you to take action on your own. And we've highlighted some pretty intense sponsoring activities, as well as some one-off activities that you can participate in and help organize. So to just provide you with a range of options to think about. We also have an online guide on our website that covers many of the activities that people are going to be talking about on this Zoom call. So take a look at that as well, and it's called Welcoming Refugees. Today, we're going to talk about 6 initiatives. Each person will talk about 5 minutes. And then we're going to have a discussion afterwards about some of the questions that many of you have been asking about how do you get started, how do you get people involved, and those kinds of things. We're going to start with Chris McCormick, who's going to talk about tutoring in Gulf Coast of Florida. Let me just go over each of them, and then we'll let each of the people talk. Kate is going to, is from Madison, Wisconsin, Kate Schachter, and she's going to talk about refugee-related fundraising activities. Madison is a dynamo when it comes to fundraising, and many of you probably know about their calendars and cards and the rest, so they've been able to fund lots of important things. Hopefully John Berry will join us, and he's going to talk.
He's on, Evelyn.
Oh, good.
Sorry, here.
Okay, John, good. And he's going to talk about a project that they have ongoing involving New Americans, refugees, and a gardening project that they're doing in conjunction with another organization. John Martin and Kathy Shepard are going to talk from Connecticut, are going to talk about hosting refugees through Welcome Corps, and they are doing it through the Connecticut Peace Corps Association. Jessica Dreyer, on the other hand, is working with a group of individual returned volunteers and other people in the community doing something quite similar. So we wanted to just show you different ways of doing that. And then Ann Baker is going to talk about a project that both she and I have been involved with that helps set up apartments for refugees. And it's kind of a one-off thing. You don't have to take part in it all the time. And it's a good way to get started with all of that. So let me start with Chris. And Chris, why don't you talk a little bit about the Gulf Coast Tutoring Project?
Okay. Well, greetings to everybody, and I'm looking forward to hearing all of your stories. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in the Dominican Republic, 68 to 70, where I taught in a teacher training program and did community development. My career has been language teacher and school director with a lot of overseas teaching after I retired. I belong to the RPCV Gulf Coast Florida group, which has a large membership, but I estimate about 30 to 40 members regularly attend meetings and work on projects, and we're from Bradenton and Sarasota, Florida. In December of 2021, we heard that Westminster Retirement Community in Bradenton had sponsored about 50 Afghan refugees in connection with Lutheran services. Westminster was providing subsidized housing, job-related training, and jobs as housekeepers, dishwashers, and waiters. 2 university-educated sisters got jobs as receptionists, and housekeeping supervisor, and Noman Raufi, who was a translator in Afghanistan and a lawyer, was hired as liaison and had many responsibilities related to the adjustment and training of the other refugees. Right away, members of our RPCV group got started collecting household items and delivering them to Bradenton. I had recently retired as director of a nonprofit English language center for immigrants and had many connections in the Bradenton community through my church, Manatee Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, previous teaching jobs, and our RPCV group. So I volunteered to recruit and train teachers because I saw English as a critical skill and I had the right background and a very strong interest. Noman was very cooperative and provided me with all the information I needed about the potential students. I bought used textbooks online and Westminster offered to pay for them. I had meetings with potential teachers and gave them basic training, listened to their preferences and matched them with one student or a small group. Most of my volunteers were retired and came from many professional backgrounds. We got the classes started in Westminster facilities such as art room or a library or the student's home, and a couple online very quickly. By February, we probably had 10 classes going with 15 to 20 adult students. We found that learning English was so much harder for Dari and Pashto students than it was for Romance language students, and learning progressed slowly, but friendships developed quickly. We also found that our students needed help with so many other aspects of daily life. Some RPCV volunteers who did not feel comfortable teaching gave rides to medical appointments and helped in so many different ways. Over the past 3 years, we have had potluck dinners where our group brought school supplies and we organized book bags for 20 children. Returned Peace Corps volunteers also attended an amazing Afghan dinner at my church, and a very well-spoken Afghan student from New College and some of the other refugees spoke. And we had many of the Afghan families there also. The first Christmas was 2022, and an elementary school called me and asked me to deliver generous gifts to 6 children, and I felt that I had to have something for the other 18 children, however small. The next year, 2023, they were asking where Santa Claus was, and our RPCV group donated items and money, and my Unitarian church had a gift tree with the children's wishes, and Santa very generously gave to 26 children and their parents. This year it's all happening again, and my upstairs bedroom is overflowing. Returned Peace Corps volunteers and other teachers will help me give out the gifts to 7 families, which now includes Ukrainians and Nicaraguans who came later, also working for Westminster. The work of teaching, advising, and giving has all been voluntary and individual, and people do what they can. We still have about 10 teachers working 2 to 4 hours. About 6 of them are from the RPCV group, with adults and with children. Unfortunately, some of the adult Afghans have quit studying, and teachers have been drawn toward the more motivated adults and children. So we're not serving everyone equally, which I hear about frequently from the children and adults who feel left out.
Chris, time to wind down.
Okay. Some of the adult men have moved away, and there are about 40 or 50 still in Bradenton. So I'll jump here and I'll just say that Bradenton has been a very welcoming community for the refugees, although they're studying financially and wish they had better housing. They're doing okay here, and many are advancing in education, which is very nice to see. And we've really enjoyed them, have strong friendships, and it's been a very worthwhile project.
Thanks so much, Chris. We'll get back during the question and answer period. Okay, we're going to move on to Kate Schachter and Wisconsin and that presentation. Let me see. Why is this not moving? Ah, there it is. There we go. Kate, you're on.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm putting a couple of links in the chat that may be useful to people. You can always create a digital file of this later from the chat screen. But I wanted to talk with you all about the Freeze for Food fundraiser and our gift away, and the calendar to a certain degree. I think it's the interesting thing about these projects is that we were formed in 1981 at a local bar, of course, with the encouragement of the area Peace Corps recruiter. The RPCV Madison has been nurturing a small but engaged group of members. So in two of the activities, well, one of them, the Freeze for Food, actually started the next year in 1982. And it was because one of the members was a runner, and he understood the running community, and he really thought that this would be a good fundraiser, and he talked the rest of the group into it. Well, here we are coming up to our 44th year, and it's been quite an amazing opportunity for raising funds. The Freeze for Food has generated $112,000 since 1982, and that has been dispersed to a couple of different organizations. It was identified as something specifically for doing big work, being able to give lots of money to support some kind of project. And the 5K, 10K run walk has been organized by a number of different race directors over the years. I was a race director for a number of years as well. And then the gift away started after the international calendar. So the calendar is about 34 years old, and the gift away started sometime a few years after that, when we realized that we needed a good, consistent way of giving out grants. So the calendar project was started in 1988. But the gift away could not have even been conceived of without having the calendar. The freeze was started with basically no money. I mean, just pocket money from the members. It did not need a lot of upfront cash costs, and therefore it was pretty easy to get started. And now today, we've raised a lot of money for Oxfam and for the Columbia Support Network, and now for the last 7 years for Open Doors for Refugees. We're very proud of those works. There's a few things that are important to know about doing something like this. The freeze. Let me start with the Freeze for Food. So know your community. The return volunteer who was a runner knew that this would work, and he was able to talk people into it. Today, at that time, it was the only cold weather running event in Madison. And today, there are weekly running clubs and fundraisers throughout the winter. So I like to think that we had a little something to influence about getting that energy motivated in Wisconsin, in Madison at least. So in 1985, we did a pivot. That's one thing that we learned, is that you need to respond to the situation. That is still our on record coldest freeze of all time, and it was at -9 degrees, which included the wind chill. We think that people paid not to run, but the donations that we were able to collect went from a few $100s to over $2,000 in that 1 year. So it was pretty clear that. But we kind of we owned it, and we embraced it, and we decided that our group motto was "We never cancel due to weather." So one of the key successes to the freeze is that we were committed to having fun. In 1999, we added a post-race chili cook-off event at an RPCV home. So it was after the race, we'd go over to their home in the Arboretum, beautiful home. And everyone would bring pots of chili or beers or whatever it took to get people in the door. So, and that year we also changed to the Columbia Support Network.
Kate, you have to
That's what I was
start
afraid of.
winding down. Yep.
All right,
But
all right.
There'll be opportunity later. Sorry.
Right. No, I knew this was going to happen. There's too much to say. All right. I'm going to just leave it there. I'll leave you all hanging for the later questions. And if you have questions, then it'll be a good time to ask them. Thank you very
great.
much.
Thank you so much. Okay, the next speaker is going to be John Berry from Seattle, and he's going to talk about gardening and refugees or immigrant group.
Yes, and I think a key to the success of what we have been doing here is having a great partner in World Relief Western Washington. World Relief has got a presence kind of all over the world, but their program here in Western Washington has been focused on refugee families and children and helping them integrate. And they have a whole suite of services that they offer. One of the innovative ideas that we have been helping out with is they had built a relationship with a local church, which had a large parking lot that they weren't using, and they figured out a way to basically kind of tear up the asphalt and turn that into 40 different garden plots. And so they call this the Paradise Parking Lot Gardening, a refugee garden. And so what we have been doing over the past several years is twice a year we go and we volunteer to help put the beds, the garden plots to sleep in the fall and wake them up in the spring. And then in the summer, there are about 40 plots there, and refugee families can come and for a small fee, they get access to the plot, and they grow the kind of, culturally appropriate foods that they were missing from home. Kent, Washington, which is south of Seattle, is also a bit of a kind of a food desert. And so there's not good access to fresh foods and those, good green leafy vegetables. So we have been, interestingly enough, for the last several years, I kind of figured out that I've got a big car and the thing to do is just offer to drive people down there. So we've had a group of anywhere between half dozen to a dozen folks who showed up. It's nice because it's low commitment. It's a couple hours twice a year. The World Relief folks think that we're rock stars because you just tell a Peace Corps volunteer, here's a shovel, go do something with it, and they'll figure it out. And it's also nice from us for planning purposes, just because while I've felt inclined at times to get more engaged in supporting refugees, we just don't have the bandwidth. I don't want to be in a position where I'm committing, to offer somebody a ride from the airport, and then the volunteer has a flat tire and isn't able to deliver. So this is proven to be something that's flexible. Gives us a chance to be together, to tell stories, and to help out. And so what we decided to do this year is to just ask, hey, look, guys, we've been working with you for a couple of years now, several years, and is there some other way we can deepen this relationship? Is there some other form of support that we can offer? And with this, we had in mind NPCA is offering matching grant funds of up to $1,000 for affiliate groups who are doing, projects involving the third goal in this case, or working with refugees, outreach programs that basically kind of, further promote the goals of Peace Corps. So that's kind of where how the conversation started was just a question, an idea that there's this money that we could apply for, and a question to World Relief as to how we could best work together and raise some money for them. They came up with a brilliant idea of a kids zone, which is basically depaving another section of the garden where that they could put up a kind of a little area with some bedding and some logs and tables and things for the kids to play on, so that the kids can hang out while their folks are gardening. And so we are having our holiday party this weekend, and we'll be raising money for that. We're hoping we've got $500 in matching money from CPACs, and we're hoping to raise another 500 at the party, and then apply for a grant for 1,000 from NPCA. And this will be kind of seed money. It's not going to be enough to fund the whole project, but we're hoping that once it gets started, that the momentum will continue. So
Perfect.
I saw the finger in the air, but there's one last thing that I want to throw out there. And it's that I'd like to find a way to capture all these stories that we're sharing tonight and write something up for Worldview, because I feel like at this moment in time, it's important for us to lead by example. And it's important for us to be mindful of those who are most vulnerable, and to show folks that Peace Corps volunteers are still engaged and to offer them some ideas. So if you guys are game for it, I'm happy to put a pen to ink, pen to paper, and try and capture some of these stories and get them published in Worldview.
I mentioned that earlier, so we can we will follow up with all of that. So with that, we'll come back and talk about all of these projects. Let's move on to John Martin and Kathy Shepard from Connecticut, who are sponsoring refugee family through Welcome Corps.
Wrong way.
Oh.
Oh. Thanks, Ellen.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm John. My name is John Martin. I'm the president of the Connecticut Return Peace Corps Volunteers.
Oh, sorry.
And let me just, I was a volunteer in 92 to 94 in Costa Rica.
And I'm Kathy Shepard, a member of the Connecticut RPCV group. And I was a volunteer in Georgia in 2019 and stayed to 2022.
Great. So we're going to talk about our what, how, who, when, where tonight. We're going to go fairly quickly because we do have a number of slides, but the purpose of the slides is so you guys kind of have a roadmap as to where we are. So in terms of our what really is to help refugees. It's also to be a model for other Return Peace Corps volunteers to do the same thing, because it's really a critical need. And then lastly, at least from me, I've been in my position for a little less than a year. It's also, the goal is to energize the organization. So next slide. So,
and because people don't always know what's involved, it's really not a difficult process. All you've got to do is get 5 people minimum to be the leadership group, and raise 60% of the funding that would be needed for your family, which the Welcome Corps determines $24.25 per refugee. And then once you've got your 60% and your 5 people, then you can apply to be a Welcome Corps group. Next slide. This is from Welcome Corps. And so you have the sponsor group you create, then you fill out the application, which John and I did, and it wasn't really that difficult. Those are the, I won't read all this because we want to get this in 5 minutes. Next slide.
So the WHO is really the organization that we have. So I've already mentioned the Connecticut Return Peace Corps Volunteers, but we've partnered with Wesleyan University. And they have a Wesleyan refugee project. And we also have 2 Wesleyan staff members who are part of the team. So the core group that started this and has done most of the work so far are 7 RPCVs, Connecticut RPCVs, and then 2 Wesleyan staff. We expect the Wesleyan Refugee Project to help us once our family is here. We should note that we don't have a family yet. We have, one of the reasons for Wesleyan is, they've got language skills if we need it. And, we don't know that yet, but a good partnership so far. Next slide. The where, I mentioned Wesleyan. So why are we doing this in Wesleyan? Well, you might know Wesleyan is in Middletown, Connecticut, which is centrally located in the state. It's not a big state, but we do have a lot of volunteers all over, and we wanted to do this project where we would have the maximum of our members here. And also Middletown is a lot cheaper than the New Haven or Hartford area. So it really, and this was a recommendation from others. So this is where we're planning to resettle the family. Next slide.
So we applied at the end of July and were notified in August that we were accepted. So we spent the rest of the following months preparing, getting our volunteers, securing our initial funding. And we expect to have our family sometime mid to late January, theoretically. That's the goal. And so we are very, very excited about hitting the ground running and having everything ready to go when they tell us they're arriving at the airport. Next slide.
And our why really, as I said at the beginning, it's really to help the refugee family that we get. And it's also to be a model for other return Peace Corps groups. And then I said before, to energize our organization. We think Peace Corps volunteers are really natural for this kind of work, right? We all, when we go to our sites, we kind of are like refugees. We don't know the culture. We don't know the language. And so we want to be that help for this family. Next slide.
And I won't go through all of this, but it just kind of gives you an overview of what we're asking for volunteers to do and the kind of the tasks that need to be accomplished in resettling.
Maybe we'll
a
get to
refugee
these.
family.
We have 2 more to
Right.
do, so
Yep,
maybe
we're
we can
at the end.
right
We're
now?
at the end. We're at the end.
Okay.
Next, one more
Okay.
slide, and then and that's it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Slide.
Okay,
Yeah, next slide, this last slide.
okay, there we go.
This
Okay,
is just our core team, as you can see from here, and it's basically a little simpler from the last one.
great. So thank you so much. The
Thank
reason I
you.
was cutting you off is because our next speaker is going to be Jessica Dreyer, who's organizing a Welcome Corps group as well in the
Awesome.
District of Columbia metro area. So let me turn this over to Jessica right now. Let me go back, and then we can talk about Welcome Corps some more if we need to do that. Okay, Jessica, you're on.
Great. Yeah, and that was actually a great intro, covering everything about the Welcome Corps. So our group's a little different. Our group started because an RPCV posted in the RPCV Facebook asking if any other RPCVs wanted to form a group together and work together to sponsor a refugee. So nobody in our group actually knew each other beforehand. It was just people who commented. Then we just kind of came together, had our first virtual meeting to make sure that everyone was actually committed to this. Our initial core group had 7 people. We've since added a few more. And then, one second here. We actually chose, during the application process, you can select if you want to sponsor a refugee from a specific country and give a number that you would be willing to sponsor. In our case, we selected Burkina Faso because that's where the organizer served as a Peace Corps volunteer. And then she also had one of her site mates who was in our group. So we have 2 Burkina RPCVs, and we said we would take up to 4 refugees. We submit our application the end of August, and we received notification fairly quickly that we were matched with a refugee. He arrived on October 10th. So for us, the process was very quick. He arrived to Dulles. In the initial 30 days, Airbnb actually gives you a credit so that he can have a place to stay while we search for housing. And as John and Catherine are mentioning, housing is pretty difficult. So that's kind of what we're working on right now, is trying to find an affordable place for him to live. He's currently in the Silver Spring area just because we thought that that would be the best place for, there's a large African community there. So for more connections. So really the first thing that we did was we got the Airbnb. You have to send a few links to your partner organization that helps you secure the Airbnb. We had a big welcome dinner for him, picked him up from the airport. It just kind of reminds you of how it was when you left for the Peace Corps and went to your site. So in Ernest's case, he's 25 years old. He's never lived anywhere with running water or electricity. So imagine, you know, just showing up in a new country, being picked up by people that you don't know, and then being taken to an unfamiliar apartment. And then eventually you're going to be like left alone for the night. So as you can imagine, it's been quite an adjustment for him. He also, you know, is not from a cold climate. So he didn't really come with any of, you know, the attire for winter. So one of the first things that we did was start posting on our local Facebook groups, because our group members were scattered all around the DMV. So we're just gathering donations of clothing from neighbors. We actually got quite a collection for him to where we had to like say thank you so much to everyone who was offering, but we got him quite a bit of clothing donations. We also have to set up a GoFundMe right away. And I will chat ours here just so you can see an example of what we put together. There we go. And there's a picture of Ernest after he shortly arrived. We put a couple pictures and updates. One of the first things we did, because he didn't speak that much English, was get him enrolled in some of the English language classes through CASA. So he's been going to class Monday through Thursday every evening.
I'm sorry, we don't see the picture of Ernest or the GoFundMe.
Oh, I
Yeah,
just
click on
chatted
it.
a link.
Yeah.
So you should be able to open up the GoFundMe and scroll down for some of our updates. And there's a couple pictures of Ernest shortly after he arrived from the airport. But currently, like I mentioned, we are trying to find permanent housing for him. We've been applying to lots of jobs. The person who organized our group, she's actually part of a different group that's sponsoring a family of 4 from Venezuela. And it's interesting kind of comparing, because Ernest speaks French. So there's just a lot more Spanish speakers in the area. So it was easier for them to find employment for him because, you know, there's somebody at the job that can help train him. So when we're applying on behalf of Ernest, we're like, we have a couple French speakers in our group. They'd be more than happy to come and help be a part of his training if needed. But it is a lot. So I would just say my advice would be to make sure that you find people who are committed, because it takes a lot to research and reach out to organizations. You may not get responses right away, but reaching out to one person will lead to another contact. So we've been able to connect him with other people from Burkina in the area. You know, we're hoping to get him into a permanent housing soon.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. We'll come back to you as well. And last but not least is Ann Baker, who's going to talk about apartment setups.
All right. Well, thank you, Evelyn. Thank you all for being here today. I'm just going to talk at a different level of what I can do as an individual and not necessarily through an affiliate group, although an affiliate group could certainly get involved in something like this. So one of my challenges is, even though I'm retired, I am quite busy. I travel quite a bit, and it's really hard for me to commit to any sort of long-term volunteering, like teaching ESL or any sort of other larger projects. So I don't really commit to something unless I know I can meet the minimum time requirement. So I was really thrilled when I heard through this group about Homes Not Borders. So the mission of Homes Not Borders is to provide refugees and other forced migrants in the DC area with what they need to thrive and feel at home in the United States. So before they arrive in the DC area, they're matched with housing, but it's just that, housing with basically nothing in it. So here's how Homes Not Borders works. A couple times each week, I'll get an email from them saying that they have a family moving in on a certain day in a certain community. If I'm available, I click on the link, I sign up on the website to volunteer that day. For my first volunteer experience, I had to sign and submit a waiver. But then otherwise, from now on, I just sign up and I show up either at the warehouse or at the apartment that's assigned to the refugee family. A truck load of furniture and cars filled with other household items are unloaded, and which we unload actually. And then in generally less than a couple of hours, the apartment goes from being completely empty to ready for the family. Living room and dining room furniture set up, beds made, dishes in the kitchen, artwork on the walls, toys or stuffed animals, and school backpacks for the kids. Most of it is donated. Some of it, particularly bedding, is purchased new. Sometimes the family is there to receive the items and help set up. Sometimes they're not. But this is a very easy and very satisfying project, both for me and from the refugees that we've met directly. So I would encourage you all to look around your community and see if there are opportunities like this that are available. And one of the things I've learned, I don't have to go to every one. It fits my schedule. It's perfect. I'm going to one tomorrow, setting up an apartment for a family of 8 from Afghanistan. And it's a very, very satisfying project. And that's just in brief what Homes Not Borders does, but there might be something similar to that or other opportunities in your community. So I encourage you all to take a look.
Great, thanks, Anne, and thanks to all of you. I apologize for the short time everybody had. But let me ask the first question. What advice would you give others about getting RPCVs and other people to volunteer to do such an activity as you've done? Is it an easy thing to do? Is it hard? What carrots do you have to offer? Is there any wisdom from all of yours? Anne is, sometimes a short, easy engagement is less scary for people than a longer term one. But what advice do any of you have for people listening?
I'll just say, oh, go ahead.
The big thing is that you need to communicate regularly that you've got this opportunity, and that if you assume that people are going to read the first Facebook page, the post that you put out, that's not true. You usually need several communications like that, but also keep it fun, keep it really fun. So as a clear initiative that'll get people involved.
Thanks, that's great. And Kathy, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, we've done our communication. We talk about if you can just do a little bit, that's great. If you can do more, that's great. And so try to reach people at whatever amount of time they can give. And one of our goals with our group is we would like to have, even if one volunteer helps one time with something, I want to count them so that we show that we've had a lot of people in our community involved in this project, because the whole point of Welcome Corps is to get communities to resettle refugees led by a community group of like our group.
Right.
Very helpful. Anybody else have?
I would just say everything everybody said is true, but I think for us, we haven't received our refugee yet, but you need at least a few passionate believers to keep things moving, right? That's really important, I think, because we're going to get more people signing up once the family gets here. But, again, passionate believers, keep it going. That's what I would say.
Great.
I have
go ahead. I'm sorry, Chris.
Just a couple of ideas for recruiting teachers is provide them with what they need to do the job and continue to give them support so they can call on you when they find it rough or they have a question. So, don't just set them off to say you're on your own, be the backup. for volunteers.
Mhm.
Well, let me ask each of you, I mean, especially Chris, I guess, how important is the professional background of your volunteers? Do you need a teacher and a social worker and a healthcare
No,
specialist, or?
I let anybody volunteer, and I listen a lot to what they feel like. They'd like to work with adults or children. They feel like they understand phonics, or they prefer conversation or reading. And then, I try to match them with the right student. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I also forewarn them a lot that it's not going to be all smooth sailing. They might arrive at a home and the family's off at Tampa getting their immigration papers and forgot to notify them. So, I listen to people a lot to see what they're willing to do and what they can do. So
That's good.
Mhm.
So next question is about partnerships. I forgot, one of you mentioned the importance of your partnership with, I guess, with Wesleyan in Connecticut. But does anybody else want to talk about how easy or hard it has been to partner with other organizations and what the role of these partnerships are in your activity? I guess John Berry mentioned that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting to me. I mean, for one thing, I want to appreciate like all the work that you guys are doing, because it's a dark time, and it's really nice to hear that there are fellow travelers who are putting in the hard work and trying to make things better. Look, this partnership with World Relief. I mean, one of the things that they asked for in the grant application is how replicable is it? Well, if there was a World Relief Western Washington everywhere, I would say, yeah, of course it's replicable. But we just have a really strong local partner with deep relationships in the community. And then this gardening thing, which is kind of what got us involved in the first place. I think it's this kind of light commitment versus heavy commitment. I find, so I'm president of the CPACs, and it's hard to get folks to commit. It's hard to get folks to engage on longer term and more demanding type volunteer opportunities. So this one is kind of light, and we're also able to rely on the partner. So when we show up, they've got a shed full of tools. Man, I would have loved to have those tools when I was a volunteer. They've got it really awesome, and they're well funded and they're well organized. So when we get to work, they've got something plotted out for us to do. So everybody feels like it's because it's well organized that they are able to make a meaningful commitment. So I do think that role of partnership is something that's really key to making it meaningful for volunteers, and then to encouraging them to participate.
I would just add, I mean, there's no World Relief everywhere, but there are lots and lots of community-based organizations that are involved in this work, whether it's on the education side or the setting of apartment side or the health side. Just have to look in your community. Actually, in the guide that we have on our website, there's a map that you can click on of all of the designated refugee agencies around the country. And then through them, you can find out who all of these partner organizations are. We couldn't get to each community level, but you can contact these refugee agencies that have been designated by the federal government to receive the refugees, and then find what that whole network of organizations is. Another question, it's also related to all of this involving volunteers. Do you have any suggestions about how to sustain efforts? And I guess I'd ask Kate, with this long history in Madison, what keeps you guys going?
Well, perhaps partly the money, but I mean, it's not like we're
in raising the money, right?
It is. I mean, the calendar has raised over, well, I'm not sure what the number is, but it's in the 2 million plus over since the years that it's been out there. But yeah, we're doing, and we're not getting the money. This is going to specific people. All of our profit goes back out into charitable work, into Peace Corps partnership program grants, into the Freeze for Food, and into the gift away. So and then at the end of those two, the gift away especially, we have the right to kind of spend the profits, the profitable aspect of the work, and all of the volunteers, all of the members have a voice, if they want to use it, about how we're going to spend that money. And so there's an ownership and an interest and a pride in the work that we've done.
That's great. Any other thoughts about sustaining the effort? Chris, you've been doing this for a while.
We've been going 3 years, and I have teachers who've been teaching for 3 years, and I think it's the personal relationship between the tutors or helpers and their families that keeps it going. And we've attended birthday parties and weddings and given baby showers, and real friendships have developed. And I know that's what's keeping a lot of my tutors going. It's just they've got a real connection with the family or the individual, that they don't want to let go of because they value it.
I guess that's my last pre-planned question is about anecdotes about why this is important.
I have an awesome anecdote about something from Open Doors for Refugees. About 2.5 years ago, a Janesville, Wisconsin teacher, 3rd grade class, had a donation drive for Open Doors for Refugees. But let me start by saying that Janesville is a blue-collar town built by vehicle manufacturing, then decimated when GM pulled out. It is also the home of Paul Ryan, former Republican Speaker of the House. So a conservative, small Wisconsin town. This teacher asked Open Doors for a wish list, and the school purchased $350 worth of items like dish towels, pot holders, food storage bags, boxes of tissues, and other small, useful items. These were made available for the kids, the 3rd graders, to purchase with credits earned for good behavior, and they were placed on the charity cart at the school. Now, at Jefferson, most of the kids qualified for free lunch, and many of their families received social services at home. So the teacher was interested in giving the kids an opportunity to give back to less fortunate members of the community, in this case, refugee families. There was also a classroom learning component about refugees as well. The good behavior credits could also be used to buy candy bars and other small treats from the prize cart for the kids, their friends, and family members. So they had to choose between eating a chocolate bar or giving a refugee child something useful for the household. Now, Barbara, the woman who told me this story and was told to her, thought this was a remarkably well-designed exercise to teach kids something about refugees, something about empathy, and something about the value of contributing to the greater good. And it was a huge success. Open Doors received a van load of supplies, each labeled with the signature of the donor or donors, because sometimes the kids would collaborate and purchase a box of Ziploc bags, for example. The teacher and some of the students came to the Open Doors warehouse in Madison, about 45 minutes away from Janesville, to take a look around and make a short video to show the other classmates and share their show where those items that they had gifted landed. So that's the story. It's just an amazing story that she told last week.
That's great. Any other stories anybody want to tell? Jessica, do you have any stories you want to talk about?
Oh, I do have one that happened shortly after Ernest arrived. So I know, like, we were talking about why we think RPCVs would be a good fit. And, obviously we know how it feels to live in a new country, totally different circumstance. And I mentioned earlier that Ernest, had never lived anywhere with electricity or running water. I don't speak French, so I'm using Google Translate, but he told me that he wanted to learn how to cook eggs. And I was like, okay. So I go over there, and I was thinking he meant like fry an egg. So I brought, like cooking spray and everything. And we're just like pointing to different bowls. He's like, oh, okay, I get it. You want to boil your egg. So I had to show him how to turn the stove on, how to turn the vent on under the microwave. And once the water started boiling, he just immediately stuck his head under the stove and watched as like the vapor was being sucked out, and just like makes you realize that like, oh, that's right. You know, he's never experienced this. When we showed him and walked him out how to take the trash out, he was amazed by like the metal bar on the door that you push to open the door. He was pointing at all the pipes in the basement because he's like never lived with running water. So he was like, what's that? And I'm like, that's normal. It's the basement pipe. But just kind of makes you realize, and I think RPCVs have that perspective of what it kind of feels like to be a newcomer. So that's why I feel like, you know, RPCVs would be a good fit to help somebody transition to a new country.
Great.
Well said.
I have one I can share, a quick one I can share as well. One of the first apartment setups I did was for a family from Afghanistan, and the family was actually there. They're not always there, but the family was there for this setup. They didn't speak a word of English, and we didn't speak any Dari. And actually, to be honest, I'm not sure if it was Dari. I think it was Dari that they were speaking. But at one point, there were some of us in the bedroom setting up some of the beds in there. And I found that I could understand some of the communication between the father of the family and one of the other volunteers. And the father was speaking Dari. The other volunteer was speaking Urdu. And I just jumped in there with some of my Fiji Hindi from my Fiji days. And we had enough common words that we could understand each other and have a little bit of a conversation, enough in common to break the ice and to you know, make them realize that they are welcome here in the US. So RPCVs, we speak their languages, even if it's just on the basics. We know what it's like to relocate to a new home in a new country with a new language and new customs. So it was a very powerful moment to have all of us, just a couple of broken Hindi and Urdu and Dari, and carrying on this little bit of a conversation while we're setting up their apartment.
Great, thanks. Chris, are there any questions from the audience? I can't see that.
No, there's no questions in the chat at all.
Oh,
So
there's
if
one.
Does anybody
Someone
raise
just-
your hand if you want to ask a question, if you want to?
one just popped in.
Wait.
I don't see
Yeah,
everybody, but
May just put a question. How long did it take the refugees to realize that the USA did not match the image from the TV and movies?
great
Thank you, May.
question. Any answers to that?
We'll let you know in a couple months.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well-
and Ernest is still adjusting. So, I mean, he's just, whenever we meet up, everything's new still. So it's hard for him to really, you know,
Well-
point out what he thinks or doesn't think it's supposed to be like.
I'll provide, and I'm the moderator, but I'll provide an answer. It's not just not like on TV, but it's also what all the opportunities are going to be, and you know how rich everybody is. And we worked with, again, another family from Afghanistan, and they were both they both had legal training. They were well educated. They weren't full lawyers, but they had legal training and the rest, and their kids were good in school. But it was just so hard to get a job here. It was so hard on every single thing, transportation, getting to the job. You know, I helped get them, the wife, a job in the deli counter of a local store. And quite honestly, they went back to Germany, where they had been refugees to start out with, because it was just too hard to get their kids situated. The younger ones were in school, but the older ones were, you know, we were trying to get them into higher ed and get financial support for them. So sometimes they think once they get here, it's all going to be good and it's all going to work out. And for many it does, but it's not always easy. And part of our job is to help facilitate that. And what we recognize is that a lot of our systems aren't set up to be easy to use. You really have to work the systems to get the kinds of benefits you need. So that's just a lesson that I've learned over the years. not through the Peace Corps connections, but through other refugee work I've been doing. So just to close out this session, because it's 9 o'clock, and I know we usually try to go for 1 hour. We have some upcoming events that we wanted to tell you about as well. First, we recorded this session and we will post it within a day or two, so everybody can look at it and work on it. John, I really appreciate your idea of writing an article, and we'll follow up with all of that with this session. But our upcoming events are January, New Year's resolutions. Lots of people say I'm going to do something that has impact, and we're going to talk about what you can do working with Peace Corps Community for Refugees, or the kind of work that you're doing in your community. Every month we have informal conversation, information sharing sessions. We had one just 2 days ago that was really, really good conversation. Not necessarily lots of people on them, but if you have a question or you just want to talk to other people about and listen to what they're doing, that's really important. We've scheduled a session on knowing your rights, and knowing your rights are both the refugee, asylum seeker, new immigrant rights, but it's also rights of individuals to help these individuals. And we thought that that was important, since lots of people are worried about what's going to be happening. And then you can read all of this advocating at the state and local level. Many of the decisions made related to refugees are in state programs or federal programs that are administered by states, or local communities becoming asylum communities. So there are lots of decisions that get made at the state and county and local level. And so we want to highlight some of those other things. And then we'll talk about education, kind of tutoring that Florida is doing, Gulf Coast of Florida is doing, but also engaging children in early childhood programs and enrolling them in kindergarten and all of those kinds of things. And then in April, we're going to talk about climate refugees. So I invite you very much to join us, and we'd like to hear from you about what you are doing, so that we can organize some more sessions like that, and just include the information in our newsletter and other vehicles that we have. And here are the different ways you can get in touch with us. So we very much look forward to seeing you again at another event, and hope you got something useful out of this. I found it really helpful. Christine, yes.
Just before we jump off, May had a great suggestion in the chat box. If anyone has been thinking about making a documentary of their experience to share with other people, that was a great suggestion, May. And also John Berry and Chris, Natalie would like to be in touch with you. And Chris, it looks like you got Natalie's email.
I did, yes.
Yeah. One of the things we've been finding about these type of webinars is the networking that goes on. So very cool that you guys are exchanging information with each other. And just a reminder that Peace Corps for Refugees also has a very active Facebook account, Instagram, and a website also.
Thanks.
All right.
Just write us and we'll try to connect people. So thank you so much for taking part tonight, and thank you.
Thanks, Ella.
Peace Corps community.
Bye.
Thanks, Ellen.